Welcome back. You're still watching The Globe. The delegation attending the South Africa-Botswana Binational Commission meeting in Pretoria observed a moment of silence to honour all of those who died in the KwaZulu-Natal floods. International Relations and Cooperation Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor hosted her Botswana counterpart, Lemogang Kwape. Gaborone and Pretoria are looking at ways to boost their economies after the devastating period due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, the court in Botswana has slapped former President Ian Khama with charges for illegal possession of firearms, amongst others. Khama is reportedly exiled in South Africa at this time. Khayelihle Khumalo has been following the story.
An opportune moment by two neighbours, South Africa and Botswana, to rebuild their economies that were battered by COVID-19. At the heart of this cooperation are critical issues like boosting trade, immigration, defence, tourism and other key matters.
We meet here today, as we discussed earlier, in very trying times. Both our countries' economies are emerging from the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our countries have a responsibility to work closely together to address the resultant challenges and ensure the restoration of the dignity of our people, all of whose lives have been severely affected by the pandemic. South Africa and Botswana have a lot in common.
In light of the devastating floods in KwaZulu-Natal, Botswana Foreign Minister Lemogang Kwape also paid tribute to all those who perished in the tragedy, saying climate change has once again unleashed a blow in the SADC region.
We have been deeply touched by the ferocious intensity as well as the devastating impact of the heavy floods that ripped through KwaZulu-Natal during the past few days. We are, however, confident that as before, the resilient people of the province will rise, reconstruct their lives, and rebuild their economy.
Meanwhile, Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Ibrahim Patel says Botswana remains a key market for South Africa.
Botswana is one of South Africa's most important trading partners. In fact, the total of two-way trade between the two countries is approximately 75 billion rand. There's great prospects to grow that trade from both sides.
President Cyril Ramaphosa plans to host his Botswana counterpart, President Mokgweetsi Masisi. It remains unclear if the issue pertaining to the charges leveled against former Botswana President Ian Khama is going to feature at all. Khayelihle Khumalo, SABC News, Pretoria.
Right, for a little bit more on this story, we're now joined by the reporter on that story, Khayelihle Khumalo, and also from Gaborone, we're joined by Sunday Standard newspaper journalist Victor Baatweng. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Wonderful. And to you, Khayelihle, always good to have you.
It's always fantastic being here.
All right, let's start in Gaborone. And I just wonder, Victor, how important is this visit for Botswana?
Well, the visit is very important. Remember this binational commission that started during the era of the former President Jacob Zuma and former President Ian Khama in 2013. So before that, there used to be other meetings that were not at head state level. So since 2013, we have had that meeting going on. But for the past 2 years or so, we have not seen the binational commission meeting being held. So it's more like a resurrection of the meeting. Basically, it was because of COVID-19 that didn't get the magnitude it usually does. But because South Africa, as it was indicated in the clip, South Africa is a big trading partner for Botswana. The very important meeting for Botswana, really.
All right, and South Africa, Botswana, long history, particularly during the struggle years. And also, some might even say culturally, when you look at language as well, issues like that, this is an important relationship, despite maybe the sizes of the economies.
Well, that's right, Peter, especially because that was a sentiment that was echoed by Minister Pandor, where she spoke about these cultural affinities, the geographical proximity as well, but also anchored on the historical, just background where at some point those very notorious apartheid raids in Botswana and some of the frontline states. But also apart from that, to quote the minister again, she said, Botswana is South Africa's dependable partner. And obviously this is quite a very important time for them. You'd look at over 38 agreements over quite a range of areas. You look at tourism, you look at defense, you look at immigration, you look at the issue of transport, because South Africa and Botswana are very important for each other. You look at how the goods are moving from the ports of Durban to Gaborone and many other things as well. But also it was quite interesting to hear Botswana's international relations minister as well adding his voice to the very devastating floods that we have seen in KwaZulu-Natal, saying the people of KwaZulu-Natal are quite resilient. They'll be able to reconstruct their province.
Victor, President Masisi, how has he sold this binational commission to the people of Botswana?
Well, I think really for Botswana and the locals here is about reassuring the two countries, the relationship that they've always had. As you mentioned earlier on, there have been worries that because of the case or because of the fight between President Masisi and the former President Ian Khama, who is now in exile in South Africa, some people believed that could have tainted the relationship between the two countries. So the holding of this meeting comes at a right time to actually give an assurance that despite the difference between the two leaders of Botswana, with the one seen as having a closer ear, like the former President Ian Khama here, it's believed that he has an access to President Cyril Ramaphosa. So that somehow made some people get worried in terms of how the relationship of the two countries would go. So having to see the two leaders meeting tomorrow gives some form of assurance that at least at state level, the relationships are still good.
All right, we'll talk a little bit more about the Khama-Masisi drama just now, but just paint a picture for us of what happened today and how it sets up tomorrow.
So right at the very heart of the discussions, Peter, it's the issue of the economy and also boosting trade between these two countries. At some point, I spoke to the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Ibrahim Patel. So he said this is quite a very important occasion, albeit it is a ministerial session. So the presidents will be meeting tomorrow once again, looking at the outcomes post the ministerial session. But also, we know with COVID-19, a number of economies really took a knock. So there was a clear admission that this is a very good opportunity for Gaborone and Pretoria to look at ways, how do they reset, how do they recalibrate their economies, and also look at some of the key sectors, perhaps that might be very lucrative in terms of trying to accelerate the economic growth and making sure that they deal with some of the socio-economic challenges that are still affecting their countries. But also, it's always quite interesting whenever there's Botswana involved, because this is a country that has always been hailed as a stable democracy. It does have its own challenges, but it's always fascinating to see how South Africa as well lends so much in terms of how they can just bolster these bilateral ties.
All right. So as a result of today, tomorrow should go smoothly and it'll be a great PR event and it'll tell a particular story. Let's go back to Botswana. And Victor, this elephant in the room, and we're not sure whether it's even going to be addressed. Maybe they'll speak about it quietly. But President Masisi and former President Khama, what is at play here? Is this a personal issue? Are they bona fide charges that former President Khama needs to face?
Well, the issue really keeps on changing colors. One moment you think it's a personal issue. The other, you want to see it as one man in power trying to actually put in practice the rule of law. Because this fight really has been going on for the past 4 years, since 2018 or thereabout, since former President Khama left office. Some people had thought that by now the fight would have found its way out of the country. But it seems each passing month there's something new that comes up. You would recall that former President Ian Khama left South Africa in November last year. Initially, everyone had thought that it's just a short visit. And as we speak, it's almost 6 months now while he is across the border. And today, as you mentioned, he was supposed to appear in court for charges that have been leveled against him for something that has happened while he was still in office. It would also be interesting to see when they next appear in June, whether he will be able to come on board. To come back and attend the court session in person, because some of his co-accused made it to court today. But all in all, the eyes are on the two men. And like I said earlier on, the little worry that is there is that some people believe that former President Ian Khama is a close ally to President Cyril Ramaphosa. So they were worried that if President Ramaphosa has an ear to President Khama as opposed to Masisi, that could in a way dent the relationship between the two countries. So it will be interesting to see tomorrow whether the two men will be able to share a biscuit over the issue of the former president, or they will choose to just focus on the trade and other relations that we have as the two countries.
How do people in Botswana feel about this, what might be described as a feud between these two men? I would imagine there are some people that may be even embarrassed by what's going on.
Yeah, the nation is really divided, to be honest. The nation is divided. There are those who believe that President Masisi is following the rule of law. And then there are those who believe that he's just being personal. He's using state machinery to fight the men who gave him the office. And because of that, the entire nation really, almost on daily basis, the talk is about this fight. Mm-hmm. For the past 4 years, it has always hindered progress. Key decisions, some of them, whenever they are made, people always link them to the fight between the two men. And it's really something that no one had seen coming before 2018 or thereabout, because the two were really close allies.
How might President Ramaphosa play this one? It's unlikely that they'll talk about this on a public platform. Maybe behind closed doors, they might have a quiet word. This isn't the first time that, when we think about Bridget Motsepe, that Masisi seems to be there and, issues are raised. How might the president play this?
I think just behind closed doors, they may look into this particular issue. But you'll recall at some point, Peter, when Minister Sisulu was the international relations minister, at some point she had to go to Botswana to try and though the very frosty relations between the two countries. But also there has been some very worrisome developments where we've seen also South Africa as a chairperson of the SADC Troika responsible for defense, security and politics. In some instances, the president of Botswana will not attend some of those sessions. At some point, in fact, he went to the SACU session, the Southern Africa's custom union, as opposed to a very critical issue around security. But of course, this is quite a very long-standing particular issue, especially because, Peter, whenever you speak to former President Khama, just like my colleague was just alluding, he perceives this as a personal persecution. He says his family has been hounded, he's being abused. In fact, he talks about how Botswana has regressed as this flagship of democracy in a region that has always been dubbed as a dark continent. So to some degree, it does raise a number of questions, but in as far as the Binationalist Commission is concerned, I don't really see the two heads of state saying, look, this is what is going on. this is one of those issues behind the scenes, silently, they'll be looking at.
So what will be a win this week for both South Africa and Botswana?
I think it's going to be quite important for the two heads of state to have such an opportunity to come together. It's very unprecedented. They haven't had an opportunity to meet under such a platform. It's been working visits. It's been meeting from on the sidelines of the AU and other platforms. So this is going to be very important in terms of throwing those frosted ties, maybe trying to clear the air that actually, we are working together. We have been sending our troops to Mozambique, South Africa and Botswana working together, and other troops contributing countries. So it's going to be a very key signal, other than, of course, other areas of cooperation with economies that have been affected.
Victor, I think you might have partly answered this earlier, but what would President Masisi have to come back with for his trip to be seen as being successful?
I think if you look at if you're going to look at from the perspective of his fight with Khama, it would be some form of assurance from South Africa that if his government is to issue an extradition or to request for an extradition of Khama. Remember earlier on I said President Khama was supposed to be in court today, but he didn't show up. Ideally, in our legal process, Botswana should be able to ask South Africa to deliver him this side. So it's one of the things that we are going to see before the end of June, whether Botswana would issue that statement. But obviously, the President Masisi, as a head of the executive, would not necessarily be the one doing that. But some form of convincing of why he feels the South African government needs to hand over Khama for him to face some of the to face the law, really. So it's for Botswana to be key to that, to see if he would be able to convince Cyril or Cyril's government to do that.
And then on the actual issues on the table, which is the bilateral relations between the two countries and what they're discussing, away from all of this drama, what does he need to bring back to Botswana?
Largely, it has to do with trade. I mean, the most part of the talk usually happens at SACU level, where Botswana and South Africa have been founding members of SACU since 1910 or thereabout. So there have been talk of the change in revenue sharing formulas and all the like. Those are some of the things that Botswana usually look out for, because Botswana has been trying to industrialize, and part of the reason why it is not fully industrialized was because of the arrangements that are there at SACU. So perhaps it could be interesting for Botswana to know what new arrangement could be made between South Africa and Botswana. So the interest largely is on trade and how to improve the trade relation between the two nations.
Victor Baatweng, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Your insights from Gaborone, greatly appreciated. Khayelihle, there's no way we're going to extradite Ian Khama.
Well, I don't see it happening anytime soon because, there's quite a lot at stake here. And, there's quite a lot of proximities among some characters involved here.
All right, let's see what happens with the presidents tomorrow. But it looks like it's going to be a positive meeting, all things told.
Yeah, very much so.
All right,
Khayelihle, trying to doorstop.
Great talking to you. I'm sure we'll catch up with you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, now that's where we'll leave that story.